One of the reasons Great Ape Trust has so much potential is because it will give people an opportunity to see another species across time in an unusual environment in a way they've never done before. In order to understand ourselves as humans, we need to understand through the lens or the mirror of another species that's very closely related to us many aspects of our behavior. Simply by visiting and seeing a group of creatures that look very much like early Australopithecines. They often walk bipedally. They look like something that just kind of stepped out of a textbook that's something between an ape and a human. They appear to be talking to each other all of the time. And you can't just call those things they're saying to each other screams or little high-pitched noises, because they can run over and on a board of symbols they can touch and you hear English words. And those English words make sense to you.
About doggies?
Dog.
The question you have to ask yourselves is, why, if they can understand spoken English, why can't we understand what they're saying? If we're truly the most intelligent species on the planet, and we've been able through that intelligence to design this wonderful material world, what is our problem in understanding them? If bonobos have potentials that no one thought were there even 10 years ago, that we're now seeing on a daily basis and that are surprising us, then obviously we as humans have to have potentials that we didn't know. These are the kinds of new and creative innovations that are possible at Great Ape Trust, that are simply not even being thought of, much less being actualized anyplace else today. Great Ape Trust has an important role to play in helping people understand why we need to preserve apes and the environment. People in general don't realize the value of apes. They in general don't realize how endangered they are at this particular point in time. We are passing through an hourglass. There are very, very few things we can really do to save the great apes at this point in time. But one of the ones that we can clearly do is to provide sanctuary and habitat within the United States for all 4 great apes in a place where they're respected, where their cognitive capacities are recognized, where they're given opportunity to communicate with humans who respect them, and where people from around the planet will be welcome to see them in as respectful and dignified circumstances as it is possible to provide.
This is Tico. He was born on June 1st, 2010. He is an extraordinary baby. And what you can see is his relationship to his human counterpart. The eye gaze, his ability to respond, the nonverbal interaction that is occurring between Sue and Tico. It's quite extraordinary. The correspondence is very, very high. It is very human-like. And the measure on this is intuitive, but I think even to the layperson, it's very clear the correspondence that exists between the both of them. But what's really most important here is the generational ratcheting effect that is occurring. When you have someone like Pamanisha and Kanzi and Inyota around a baby that is being enculturated through human forces, they have the ability to support that. They have the ability to participate in that human manner of rearing. And the synergy of that group working together has a high level of influence on the baby's development. It is the group synergy, the hegemony, if you will, of the number of individuals that belong to this culture. The more you have, the more power, because everyone's behavior, whether it's their cognitive behavior or their physical behavior, is having an influence upon the baby. All of that experience offers the baby the opportunity for that context and texture of society, and he is simply going to be a smarter and better baby for those reasons alone. It is the case that he started much earlier in this human cultural rearing than the other babies, so he's got a heads up on all of the other apes. But he also has the support of this larger group of symbolic humans and non-humans, and it's very powerful.
Welcome, welcome everybody. This is going to be a great night to live and to learn in the city of Des Moines. As we've discovered is this on? I think it is. Yes? No? Okay. Des Moines has become such a high-profile place in the last few years, and we'll get this adjusted here properly, so I'm sort of the test case out here. But whether it's political events in the Iowa caucuses or whether it's a myriad of other things that happen in and around Des Moines to make Des Moines such a great place to live. And not only does Forbes magazine say we're the #1 place to have a business or a career or raise a family, there's a lot of other people that are beginning to discover that Des Moines is a special place. I remember just a few years ago, longtime friend Ted Townsend said, I want you to come listen to an opportunity I think that we have and a dream that I have that we could all share, and something that we could bring that's very special to Des Moines. And I remember we stopped and we listened to the plans and we listened to the idea and we talked about it, and he talked to lots of other people about it. And it really was curious to me, not knowing anything about apes and or the great apes, and knowing very little about that sort of thing and how it would impact us here in Des Moines, Iowa. And I'm thinking more of sort of a zoo experience. And I'm thinking, well, this would be an opportunity for a lot of our folks to get out there and actually see it. But at the end of the day, I discovered that's not what this whole experiment is about. It's about education, it's about learning about other species, and it's about thinking about our future and our children's future and how we educate them and what it means somewhere in between apes and humans and how we link up. And I remember Ted talking about the change that happened to him when he first looked at the apes right in the eyes and said he was changed and he wanted this to happen. So it is evolved, and here we are today. And I want to also thank the library. We've had a great opportunity not only tonight, but so many other nights and many nights to come to experience authors and their experiences and how they put them on paper, and for us to really live our lives a little bit differently, and for you, Sally, and the rest of your staff for bringing these opportunities to us here in Des Moines. So I want to welcome all of you here to Des Moines and here to this evening where we're going to learn a lot and meet some really great folks, and that maybe it'll change our lives just a little bit. I am not going to do the full introduction. I'm doing kind of just the welcome. So I want to move along quickly, and let's have Ellen Hubble. Is Ellen up here or back here? Ellen, come on in. And Ellen is going to sort of introduce us to the rest of the evening and get an opportunity to welcome a great author and get us the first night's unveiling of a great new book. Ellen, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. What a great evening, and what a great crowd has turned out to help launch this very special book. It's just proof again that when Des Moines has something wonderful going on, that people do show up. I want to take just a minute for a little housekeeping. Please turn your cell phones off. And if you would, it would help us a lot if you do an evaluation form on your way out this evening. Those are most helpful. And after the presentation, there will be a brief question and Q&A, if you will. And we'll be passing out cards, ushers in the aisles. And if you would write your questions, we'll bring them up here and have a nice discussion with Sara. And then after Sara speaks, Barnes & Noble will be selling the books down in the foyer, or out in the foyer, I should say, and then Sara will be signing books in the art gallery. Right now, I'd like to take just a moment to thank our sponsors for the 10th annual AViD series: the Des Moines Public Library Foundation, with financial support from Humanities Iowa, Nationwide, Wells Fargo, Douglas and Deborah West, Drake University, Iowa History Center at Simpson College, and Hoyt Sherman Place. It's my pleasure to introduce Sara Gruen. Sara is a New York Times...
I can tell you that 4 years...
Sara is a New York Times best-selling author, Canadian and American novelist, and supporter of numerous charitable organizations that support animal and wildlife. She's the author of several novels, including bestsellers, Writing Lessons, and Water for Elephants, and she's received many awards. And many of you probably read the review in the New York Times book review this past Sunday. Her book, and the topic of tonight's book launching, Ape House, explores the depths of bonobo apes with passion and precision. Sara's gift for bringing characters to life is brilliant, and her book is a fascinating mix that is skillfully researched and created with love. Before Sara comes to the podium, please enjoy this video about her journey in writing this stunning novel. And then I will be right back to get Sara on the podium.
I can tell you that 4 years ago, it would never have occurred to me that I would ever be able to say that I have great apes as personal friends. And I can now. And that's really, I don't know how else to phrase it. That's just an amazing life change. And I'm aware of them all the time. And I want other people to be aware of them. And it's sort of an otherworldly experience. And yet it's not. They're of the same world. And in fact, of the same, they're apes and we're apes. My first visit to the trust was just magical. And I don't know how else to describe it. It's life-changing to look into a great ape's eyes. You feel like they're looking into your soul and that you're looking into theirs. And to have a two-way conversation with a great ape in human language. I'm a writer. I work with words, and I have no words. Kanzi knows he's a rock star. And so he came in, and he was very confident, and he came in displaying, which the first time you see it it's very, very impressive. It's swaggering and running and sliding and hitting against walls, and then he was very eager, I think, even to show his work with the lexigram and the board and showing his comprehension and use of language. Ape House is dedicated to great apes everywhere, but especially Pam Benicia. I just felt a strong connection with her the first time I met her, and it was unexpected because she was the quiet one. She wasn't sure at first. She waited until she was sure of me, I think, until she became my friend. She just is the epitome of still waters running deep. She wasn't, I think, as eager to show off, and I had never had a conversation with an ape before, obviously, and so I had brought, thinking of ways to break the ice, I brought pictures of my dogs and of my children, and I showed her a picture of my dogs, and nothing, no response at all. And then I showed her a picture of my children, and this was from when they were much younger and they were in a bubble bath. And Pam Benicia and Liz were in there, and on the lexigram board said, "Babies washing bubbles." And it was the first time that I'd had the the actual feedback, the two-way conversation with an ape, and it was magical.
Can you find water?
Water.
Good. How about milk?
Milk.
Very good. How about lemonade? Lemonade.
Lemonade.
Good.
Because it's unique in the world, everybody wants a visit. Every scientist wants a chance to see if this is really true or if it isn't true. I think as it comes to be understood, and this book is a big start, that it's really true, that a few things will happen. First of all, the world will want to protect it. Secondly, the world will want to try to create other similar situations, not just one. And they may want to see how far down the phylogenetic scale culture goes and how far down the phylogenetic scale linguistic kinds of phenomena go if you start to study them embedded in life rather than through the didactic training method of just holding up cards. So as we do that, we'll start to get a multifaceted picture of what culture is. And I think Great Ape Trust will be seen as kind of the first place that this was ever done, and so it will always be honored throughout history because of that.
Ape House is about bonobos. It features bonobos, and it's also about human culture, and it transposes the two of them, and it explores the way in which bonobos relate to bonobos and humans relate to humans, and the different ways in which we do that. And one of the flip sides to that is the kind of schadenfreudic glee that humans take in watching other humans fail in their relationships with others. And I think that's the symptom of that is kind of tabloid journalism and the gossip rags. And so I have a little bit of fun exploring that. Many people just haven't heard about bonobos. And so if I can do anything with this book, I'd like to make people aware of them before it's too late and we lose them. I hope that I don't tell people what to think, but I do hope to make people think.
Give me a second to get myself settled because I tend to faint if I stand too long, and people get alarmed. As the video was saying, I met the apes the first time. I think I heard about the apes the first time 4 years ago when I was just about to go on tour for Water for Elephants, and I got an email with a link to Great Ape Trust. And I was fascinated for two reasons. The first is that I have had a lifelong interest in human-ape discourse. And I've been following the story of Coco the gorilla for, well, more years than I really want to admit. Since 1980. But the other aspect of this was that I'd never heard of bonobos before, and they are so fascinating. And their culture, and it is culture, is so incredibly different from that of any of the other great apes. They're matriarchal, they're egalitarian, they're very amorous, and they don't have the kind of organized violence and warfare and infanticide that is hardwired, apparently, perhaps not, perhaps it's cultural, into the other species of apes, including perhaps us. I don't think I had a moment yet to thank you all for coming and joining me on this, which is my launch, and I'm so honored to be here where it all started. And thank you very much for coming out. After I spent a couple of days poking around Great Ape Trust's website, I realized that this was what I was going to be writing about next. But I guess everybody wants to come and see these apes. And so when I initially wrote and asked if I could come and visit, they said, sure, but here's your list of homework. And there was a lot of homework, including flying up to York University in Toronto to do a 3-day crash course in linguistics. And I did it all. I was very determined to do this. But apparently getting admission to Great Ape Trust does not necessarily mean that you're going to get to see the apes, because that part is up to the apes. And so I really wanted to stack my odds, and I know that they slit open the boxes of books at midnight this morning or last night or whatever it was, so the odds are that most of you haven't read it yet. But like the reporter in my story, I really tried to stack my odds. And so I went out and bought backpacks for them and filled them with everything I could think of that might be at all amusing or tasty or fun for an ape, including Slinkies, Rubik's Cubes, Mr. Potato Heads, bouncy balls, fleece blankets, and most importantly, M&Ms. They can be bribed with M&Ms. It's a good trick for children, too. When I first got there, I went through the initiation, and I had sent word. I had asked the scientists to tell the apes that I was bringing surprises. And so I waited with bated breath. And they went to consult with the apes to see if they would see me. And the word came back that not only were they going to see me, they were insisting. And so, like I said, power of M&Ms. But so I went back, and the first ape that I met in the first visit was Kanzi. And he's a rock star, and he knows it. Literally, he's recorded with Peter Gabriel and other really legendary musicians, but he really wants to show you his language competence, and he's eager to show off, and he absorbs the attention that he knows is due. And the next ape that I met was Pambanisha. And although she is arguably perhaps even more language competent than Kanzi, she's shy and quiet, and I think she doesn't open up to people until she's sure of you. And I had never had a conversation with a great ape before, and I didn't know how to break the ice. So I had brought a couple of pictures with me. I had done my research. I knew that she didn't like cats, but she did like dogs. She is a mother, and I am a mother. And so I brought a picture of my dogs and my kids. And we sat there and looked at each other, and I held up a picture of my dogs, and I talked to her about them, and nothing. Zippo. And then I held up a picture of my kids when they were very much younger and all in a bubble bath together. And she punched into her keyboard, "Babies washing bubbles." And that was the first time that I had this two-way conversation with an ape. And what I didn't realize at the time, of course, is that being a mother gives you great social status in the bonobo world, because the infants enjoy a very high social status. And in fact, adult males will babysit because it's an honor to hold the baby. When I left, apparently Pambanisha said the next day, "Where's Sara? Build her nest. When's she coming back?" Obviously, I had to keep the relationship going, so I sent a Fruit of the Month club. And so every month they get a day with Sara's special fruit. And it was actually a while before I got back there, more than a year, possibly almost 2 years passed. But it was very, very clear that they remembered me when I went back. And it was, they were initiating the conversation, and I think that they'd been negotiating among each other and with the scientists about what was going to happen that day. I went with a film crew, and Pambanisha knew that the book was dedicated to her, and so she was getting the star treatment. And when she heard that I was out back getting my makeup done, she insisted on having her makeup done as well. So we moved into the back of the green room, and we both got our makeup done. And she was wearing very beautiful purple lipstick and powder, and then we were going to have she invited me to a tea party in the forest. And she made the tea. She has a kitchen at the trust. She has a gas range. She spread out the blankets. She set out the plates. She made Earl Grey for me, blackberry for herself. She chose the cookies. We got out to the forest, And you have to understand first, I think, that the bonobos are on a diet Tuesdays and Thursdays. And this was a Tuesday. So we sat down and we poured our tea, and Pam Benicia, using her lexigram board, asked if I wanted milk. And I said, yes, please. And I poured a little milk in my tea and I handed it back. And she went, glug. Drained it. And then she dabbed her mouth and then she told me which cookies I should try and in which order and which ones would taste good dipped in tea. And I did that. And then she asked me if I was finished with my cookies. I said, yes, I think I am. Tipped the plate back. I think she then felt bad about my cookie-less state. So she went off into the forest and she brought me back a branch of browse. A branch of leaves, they call it browse. And I watched one of the scientists eat a leaf, hoped they weren't faking it, and decided that it wasn't poisonous and ate it out of politeness. Would have been better with olive oil. Lots. And then Pam Benicia said to me, did you have boiled egg for breakfast this morning? I said, no, but I did yesterday. And she said, a bunny came by recently and hid eggs in the forest. I wish the bunny would come back. Well, in the background, there's a guy with a walkie-talkie, and 5 minutes later, the Easter bunny comes traipsing out of the trust with eggs in a basket and hid them in the forest. So if you visit Pam Benicia on a diet day, you're in for a feast, or she is. I'm gonna get on with this because I actually think that the Q&A section of this is going to be really fun tonight. So I'm going to set up the book quickly. The family of apes in it is clearly based on the bonobos here at the Trust. My bonobos in my book use American Sign Language rather than lexicograms because they are ripped out of their environment and literally need to have their language tools on hand. Well, they mysteriously, their world is rocked, and I'll say more later in the question and answer, but I'm going to read, and forgive me if like I said, this is my launch day, so I haven't had many runs at this yet, but here's a piece of the book. The bonobos used to ride along on limited errands, but all that was stopped 2 years ago after Isabel's car was swarmed at a McDonald's drive-thru. The driver of a passenger van in front of them had glanced in his rearview mirror and spied Mbongo, who had successfully talked his way into a rare and cherished hamburger and was riding shotgun. Moments later, adults and children alike mobbed the car, screaming, "Monkey! Monkey!" and trying to thrust their arms in the windows. Mbongo's response was to dive beneath the back seat as Isabel maneuvered out of line, but the incident sounded the death knell for public outings. When asked, the apes were absolutely firm in their belief that the double electric fence around their play yard was there to keep people and cats out rather than bonobos in. But they missed their contact with the outside world, so Isabel and the others brought it to them by video. At this point, the local shopkeepers thought nothing of being filmed for the viewing pleasure of the neighborhood apes. Try to run over some protesters while you're out, Isabel said to Celia, who was about to leave on a coffee run. The bonobos were particularly fond of caramel macchiatos. No one's out there, said Celia. Really? Said Isabel. There had been a gaggle of protesters outside the gates every day for almost a year, silently holding placards that showed great apes undergoing terrible procedures. Since the protesters obviously had no clue as to the nature of the work being done at the language lab, Isabel had ignored them. Okay, I'm off, Celia declared, tucking the video camera under her arm. Isabel grabbed a bottle of Lubriderm and went in to watch the end of a movie with the apes. The bonobos lolled around on nests of carefully swirled blankets, watching Greystoke, the Legend of Tarzan. Lola, a toddler, clung to her mother Bonzi's chest and neck, alternately mouthing Bonzi's nipple and letting it slide from her mouth. Jelani and McKenna lay head to head, reaching up to examine each other's faces and chests for imaginary bugs and to exchange an occasional kiss. Sam, the largest male, lay on his back with an arm behind his head and one leg crossed over the other. He was working a watermelon rind, scraping the last of the sweet flesh off with his teeth. Mbongo had set up his nest on the other side of Bonzi, away from Sam, who had reasserted ownership over a boiled ball. Mbongo was sulking in his nest, the picture of desolation. He wore his backpack, whose concave shape betrayed the ball's absence. His shoulders slumped, and he hugged his arms across his chest. Isabel knelt and put a hand on his shoulder. "Did Sam take his ball back?" she asked, signing and speaking at the same time. Mbongo stared forlornly ahead. "Do you need a hug?" asked Isabel. At first he didn't respond, then he signed with a flurry, "Kiss, kiss, hug, hug." Isabel leaned in and took his face in both hands. She kissed his creased forehead and straightened his long black hair. "Poor Mbongo," she said, wrapping her arms around his shoulders. "I'll tell you what, tomorrow I'll get you another ball, but this time don't carry it in your teeth, okay?" The bonobo pulled his lips back and nodded quickly. "Do you need some oil? Let me check your hand," said Isabel. Mbongo obligingly stretched out an arm, and Isabel took its fingers and ran her fingers over it. Although the lab had humidifiers going all the time in the winter, the air couldn't compete with that of the bonobo's native Congo basin. She squeezed a glob of lotion onto her palm and massaged it into his heavily knuckled hand. As one, the bonobos turned to face the hallway. Isabel looked from face to face, puzzled. "What? What is it?" "Visitor," signed Bonzi. The rest of the apes remained motionless, their eyes trained on the door. "No, not a visitor. The visitor's left," said Isabel. The apes continued to stare down the hallway. Sam's hair rose until it stood on end, and a pricking like tiny spiders crept over Isabel's scalp. She rose and muted the TV. Finally, she heard it, a muffled rustling. Sam curled his lips back and screamed. Bonzi scooped Lola under her arm and swung onto one of the platforms that jutted from the walls. McKenna joined them, grinning nervously. The rustling stopped, but all eyes, human and ape, remained on the hallway. After a moment, the rustling was replaced by a muted jiggling. Sam's nostrils flared. He turned to Isabel and signed urgently, "Visitor, smoke." "No, it's probably just Celia," Isabel said, although she couldn't hide the apprehension in her voice. Although it was true that Celia smoked, she hadn't had time to get the coffee and return. Besides, Celia would just let herself in. Sam stood up and swaggered a few bipedal steps. The female swung to an even higher perch. Mbongo and Jelani darted around the corners of the room on all fours. Isabel let herself out through the partition that defined the bonobo's inner sanctum and stopped to check that it was locked behind her. In 8 years of daily contact, she'd never seen the bonobos behave like this. The adrenaline was contagious. She flicked on the light. The hallway looked as it always did. The noise, whatever it was, had stopped. "Celia?" Isabel called tentatively as she approached the door. There was no answer. Behind her, Sam galloped silently past the group room, a dark and muscled mass. Isabel reached for the doorknob. "Celia? Is that—" Boom! The thunderous explosion blasted the door entirely out of its frame. As it carried her backward, she processed that she and the door were being propelled down the hall by a billowing, rolling wall of fire. She slammed into the wall. When the door came to a stop against her, the left side of her face took the brunt of the impact. She watched helplessly as the fireball whooshed past the door and rolled onward. When the door finally tipped forward and released her, she crumpled to the ground, unable to draw a breath. Her eyes shifted to the empty doorway. Shadowy figures in black clothes and balaclavas swarmed in and spread out, strangely, frighteningly silent. Crowbars swung and glass flew, but the people didn't speak. It wasn't until one of them knelt briefly by her head with oversized rubber band lips mouthing the word "shit" that she realized she simply couldn't hear what they said. Black and white static, the roar of a million bees interrupted by the fluttering of her own eyelids. She lay on her back with her head tilted to the right. She moved her tongue, fat as a sea slug, and pushed 1, 2, 3 teeth from the corner of her mouth. A vision of boots running past her. They were going after the apes, but she couldn't rise, still couldn't breathe. More static, longer this time. than blinding light and crushing pain as her eyes drifted shut. That's it for now. Thank you. And now I think I'm ready for the Q&A.
Sarah said the Q&A is going to be the most fun, so I hope you all have your questions written and you can ship them up, and we're going to sit over here and get a little more relaxed and see where we can see everyone. And I don't know if there she is. See if these work.
Good idea.
Yeah.
Can everyone hear me?
I'm going to ask the first question. I've always been curious, when you read a review in the New York Review, for example, the book review, it's always one point of view. It's the critic's point of view. And of course, your review was excellent, but I've always wondered what writers think about their own reviews, and we, of course, never hear that. So would you... I'm sure you read the review, did you?
I would love to say that I didn't, because you're not supposed to read your reviews, but yes, I did. I think that readers bring as much to a book as a writer does, and so it depends on what the person needed to read.
Mm-hmm. Were there any surprises in the review?
There are surprises in every review. I think writers are the least self-aware people on earth, and so I will be discovering what this book is actually about for the next year.
This is certainly not your first launch. How is this launch different from any of your other books or?
Well, my last launch had 8 people at it.
Okay.
It's pretty different.
Well, as a former English teacher and teaching fiction and novels and that sort of thing, were you inspired to be a writer by anyone along the way, or was it just in you all the time?
I've always wanted to be a writer. I almost had a career as a violinist, and it's a long, complicated story. I threatened to quit the violin. My parents are musicians. I threatened to quit the violin unless I was allowed to have writing lessons. And then I was allowed to have writing lessons, so I kept playing the violin, and so I ended up at university doing a performance degree, and actually had to leave the stage at the end of my second year because of stage fright. I got so nervous that my bow was literally bouncing off my string. So I did the only logical thing. I tucked my fiddle under my arm and I ran. And I switched to English the next day, and I've never looked back.
Good for you. That's great. That's a new meaning to stage fright. It kind of turned you in another direction. Okay, great. What do you think is the best way that the Great Ape Trust can be publicized/shared with the general population? It sounds so cool, yet even me, a local person, had no idea about it.
I had no idea that bonobos existed at all until 4 years ago. And one of my personal hopes for this book is that people will become aware of them and will help in the conservation effort.
Wonderful. I think the Ape Trust has already gotten some attention since knowledge about your book has come out.
Good.
Who is easier to communicate with? Is it Panamisha? Is that her?
Pambanisha.
Papanisha, or your 3 boys?
Well, my 3 boys are here, so my boys are very vocal.
Have the boys met the bonobos?
They're doing it tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Pambanisha invited. When I went on my final visit, my last visit, I explained that I had to go home to my own nest and my own family because one of them was actually saying that she wasn't going to eat until I came back. So the scientists said, what time is your flight tomorrow?
No.
So I went and explained to them all, and Pambanisha, I said, I've loved visiting your family, but I have to go home to my own now, and she wanted to meet them. So.
Oh my goodness, that makes me want to go meet Panamisha.
She's lovely.
Do you think your boys, you said they're here, could stand up?
Where are you boys? You can sit down.
Thank you, thank you.
Thanks,
We
Liz.
don't want the apes to get all the attention. What have you observed about the mourning process with the bonobos? Grief, I guess. Mourning, M-O-U-R-N.
I personally haven't. I know that they lost a member of their family, Nathan, to lymphoma very unexpectedly, very rapidly. And I've heard, of course, about their reactions, and I wasn't there.
I see.
But I know that he still has a lexigram on their board, and they still refer to him.
I imagine they have a story there at the Ape Trust. Have you seen the bonobos on this visit? I think you just answered that. You're going to see them tomorrow.
Yeah.
And the next question is, if so, do they remember you? And from what you've said,
There's absolutely no question.
they're waiting. They're not.
Yeah.
They're on a hunger strike, right?
Well, the funny thing is that, the first visit, I was trying to initiate the conversation and also trying to hold back a little bit, because the apes only speak to you if they want to. And so there's a level of trust that has to build up first. And on every subsequent visit, now they're the ones doing most of the conversation, and I just love that. They absolutely remember.
Embrace you. You really make me want to go go over there. Have you heard any comparisons to Planet of the Apes?
Nope.
Not until tonight, huh?
Nope.
Yeah.
Actually, I've never seen it. So.
Have you met Jane Goodall?
No, I
has
haven't.
she influenced you in any way?
I would love to, but I have not met her. I have
She
very
actually
much respect
came
for
to
her.
Des Moines for the AViD series a few years back, if I remember. Please discuss the title of Water for Elephants.
The title for Water for Elephants is a nod to the circus performers that I spoke to during my research. And one of the things that drives retired circus performers nuts is the claim of, well, at this point, very elderly gentlemen, that they carried buckets of water for the elephants back in the days of the train circus in exchange for free tickets to the circus. And I'm sure that they carried buckets of water for animals, but a bucket of water goes nowhere with an elephant. And so that was it. But then again, at the same time, during the course of my book tour, I had two gentlemen come up to me and swear up and down that they carried water for elephants. So I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't know.
Don't know.
But that was a nod to, that was one of the stories that I heard repeatedly from the retired performers.
I must have run into a couple of at least 2 or 3 people today, and they just happened to mention, did you know Sara Gruen is going to be here tonight? And I just love Water for Elephants. So I have not read it, to be honest with you, so I'm looking forward to that treat. Are there any more questions? Because I've run out of the cards. Oh, here we go. Here we go. As a writer, how do you spend a typical day? How do you like the aspects of the promotional tours in comparison? 2 different lives.
Yes. As a writer, I sweat blood and beat my head against my desk for 8 hours a day.
8 hours? You have a regimen?
I have to do it.
Yeah.
If I didn't
Discipline.
do it full time, then I would never finish anything. And I'm a hermit. And so there's this incredible dichotomy. You spend 3-4 years in your pajamas, and then you get shot out of a cannon on tour.
Back to stage fright.
I enjoy both, but they're very, very different.
One probably is kind of, good balance anyway. One kind of is complementary to the other.
It would probably be more mentally healthy if they were interspersed a little bit more. But such is the nature of releases.
But at least if you've lived with it for all those hours, your novel, you certainly know, you're the most knowledgeable of what you're talking about when you get up on these promotional tours. You certainly know what you're talking about. That should
I do feel
stage fright a little.
Like I've been transformed, or transformed into my fictional world every day. I go through what I consider my creative portal. I spend about an hour and a half looking at what I wrote the day before and waiting until I can move forward with that. And it's kind of a delicate process, because if the phone rings and I answer it, or if somebody talks to me, then I have to go through that hour and a half again. There's only so many hour and a halves in a work day. I've been known to hide behind the curtains from the mailman, and I'm not kidding.
That's the hermit comes out in it. Would you tell us about the bonobo culture?
Yeah, it's. I addressed it slightly during the talk, but and there are various theories about why it is that this came up, but the friendships tend to be female bonding. So there are groups of females form intense friendships, and the wild bonobos only exist in the Congo, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and the food source is very abundant there. And so one of the theories goes that there's no competition for food for the offspring, and so the females are able to form friendships because they're not competing to feed their babies. And the only known repetitive source of violence that I know of is if a male bonobo gets out of line with a female bonobo and tries to do something untoward, he's going to be set upon by a group of her girlfriends and corrected. And so that, in that manner, his DNA does not ever make it into the gene pool.
That's another book. Has your experience in this area caused you to question whether other animals, for example, dogs or horses, may have some similar ability to communicate with humans?
I have dogs and horses, and they absolutely communicate with us, but they don't do it in human language. What I think is really extraordinary about great apes and this whole field of language study is that the great apes have taken steps towards our side, but we, the rulers of the universe, have not cracked their code.
That's the one thing I picked up out of that video, the introductory video. I've never thought about it that way, and we're the smart ones.
It's very clear that they're talking to each other.
It's fascinating. Have or will you be visiting the trust next? I think you've answered that. Do you?
And again, and again, and again. I will go. Anytime they'll take me, I'll go.
You'll have to come back after and tell us. How do you feel about Water for Elephants being made into a movie?
Well, we're very excited. I didn't even allow myself to believe it until we were there on set.
And you've been there on set already?
Yeah, they finished wrapping. I mean, they wrapped, I guess. That's redundant. Yes, they finished filming, and it's coming out on April 15th, and we're very excited.
Oh, wow.
Thank you. Thank you.
And who's the star? I understand he was the one in the vampire. He's changed his persona, his image.
There's Rob Pattinson.
Okay.
But also Reese Witherspoon.
Oh.
And last but not least, Christoph Waltz, who is so brilliant in his role as August. I just can't wait to see. I can't wait to see it. I am. I really love him.
That's wonderful.
I think it's going to rival his Inglourious Bastards role.
So are you going to the premiere?
If they invite me.
The red carpet? Whoa.
I'm just the author. Me too. Thanks.
How do the apes communicate between themselves? Do they use any of the methods used to communicate with humans?
Yes. gestures, for example, are very important, and facial expressions, and all of the body language and so on is all very
Nonverbal.
present. And but also, they do also use. I mean, it's one of these. I don't actually recall if we got to the part in the video that discussed the bicultural, bi-species rearing of these apes, but they have been raised with both languages, their own and ours. And so they use occasionally a combination. They will occasionally use a lexigram with each other. Mostly they just talk amongst themselves, but there's very much the gestures and all of the minute symbols that we send each other through just eye contact, reception, nodding, all of the things that happen during
So
the course
the
of
apes
conversation.
you've met have grown up with two languages from the get-go?
Well, Kanzi certainly has. Actually, you could argue three because there's their own language. Then there's the lexigram board.
And so they just
But they're also
go from one to the other?
understanding
easily?
spoken English and simultaneously translating.
Goodness. Maybe our school systems could get on that one. How has the phenomenal success of Water for Elephants changed your life?
Well, it means I get to keep writing books. That was my goal.
And keep the violin in the closet, right?
Oh, yeah. I will occasionally haul it out when no one else is home. But
It must be exciting to have a big success like that, and then a movie coming out too about this new novel. How do you feel about the upcoming film version of Water for Elephants? I think you feel good about it.
yeah, it's a strange thing. I'd never obviously been on a film set before. But they don't shoot the scenes in order. So as the author, I kind of knew which ones they were doing, or I could make a good guess at it. But it's going to be really interesting to see what the final
A whole new
version is.
creation
Yeah,
of
and it's a very different.
bouncing off.
Yeah, and it's a very different skill, screenwriting. Condensing something that takes 12 to 14 hours to read into something that can be viewed in 2 hours is a skill that's very different from what I do.
Another creative process,
Yeah.
essentially. Yeah. How did you select the title Water for Elephants? I think we got that one too. Is Isabella Elizabeth, who worked at the Great Ape Trust?
I'm sorry?
Is Isabella Elizabeth, who worked at the Great Ape Trust?
No, none of the people in my books are based on.
Okay.
Yeah.
NPR did a story about current female authors being overlooked due to more emotional relationship themes. Agree?
Well, I just got a review. So, if you look at the statistics, then yes, it's true that male authors do get reviewed more often. But like I said, I just got reviewed, so I really can't complain personally.
Fair enough. What do you enjoy doing in your free time? What has been your favorite book that you've read this summer? Favorite book as a child?
Favorite book as a child, Black Beauty. And my current book crush is The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde by Junot Diaz, which is just fabulous. I've been shoving it into the hands of everybody who will listen to me since I read it.
I'll take note. Do the people at the Great Ape Trust who hear the bonobos talk to each other begin to understand them?
Yes. In fact, I begin to understand that there are vocalizations for yes, distinct to each ape, that I now know. And when I was, one of the things that was going on at the at York University with the linguists and their spectrogram was their vocal tract is never going to allow them to speak fluent English, but they attempt. So I've heard Pan Venetia say egg, and I've heard Kanzi say bring water. It didn't sound like that. It sounded like something with a trill. Bring water. But when they played it back and I looked at the syllables, and the linguists were just on the edge of their seat, okay, listen again.
And they
listen
weren't,
again, and then I got it. And then they just were...
And they weren't just mimicking like a parrot. They're saying, bring water. In
well,
other words,
he had actually said with his lexigram to one of the people there,
he was
bring water.
making a request.
And then the person got to talking with somebody else, and he got impatient. And so he said it. Bring water.
What does the lesson of the new baby in the group say about childhood reading? Read to... I'm going to let you see if you...
I
read to eat or act? I can't.
read to etc. Who asked the question?
Yeah.
Yes. Me too. I share it. I'm sorry.
There are several programs that try to get children to be read to as soon as they're born.
Oh, okay.
And it seems like there's a lot of learning that's going to go on with the baby because the people around it, the other bonobos, are able to communicate. Do you think that means that we should even redouble our efforts to make sure that kids are reading ready by the time they get to kindergarten?
Of course. There is, I think, and I think this is just a proven scientific fact at this point, a window of opportunity for language acquisition. And that's one of the reasons why I find the studies at the Trust so fascinating, is that it's sort of a duh moment. Of course that they're going to pick it up the same way as human infants. I think that when humans are 2 years old, our neurons are popping and forming faster than they ever are again. It's all downhill after 2, folks. Yes, I think children should be read to regularly as part of their daily routine, and I think that it's a great loss if people miss that window, because you can't actually go back, and that's the reason that Kanzi acquired language, and his mother Matata, who was exposed to it at approximately age 8, did not.
More implications for education. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm sorry. Sure.
Note. What is the value of Great Ape Trust to Des Moines, and how do you hope your book affects that?
I'm not from Des Moines, so I don't really know. I do know the value of the Great Ape Trust, and so I'm really hoping to bring some focus to the bonobos and to the work that's going on, and it's very illuminating to our understanding of ourselves to study great apes and find out what is similar among us.
Well, your book has certainly brought attention to those efforts, and Des Moines can only benefit from that. When was the last time you saw the bonobos? It's been...
I think it's 4 weeks or something.
It's time to see them again.
It is.
How do the bonobos understand your responses? For example, do you type, sign, or speak to them?
I tried very hard to learn their lexigram board by heart. And by the way, if you go to the Trust's website, there's an interactive version of the lexigram board. I tried very hard to learn it ahead of time, but I only actually started to be able to pick the lexigrams out when I was there conversing with them. It's like a French immersion course. Mm-hmm. I think you have to be doing it to learn it. But the bonobos understand spoken English. So the difficulty was for me understanding. I had translators.
Were they showing you how to do it?
Well, yes. Yes.
And what, let me see, what other routines do the bonobos have? You mentioned the kitchen. The kitchen? Did you mention the kitchen? No.
Yeah, Pambanisha has a kitchen.
Oh, okay. Making your own tea, a bedtime routine, etc. Do they have any other routines?
I'm sure. I know that they all have different tastes. They're individuals like we are, and I believe it's Pambanisha who loves horror movies, and Kanzi can't stand them, and Yoda loves Spider-Man, and so on, and so and they do. They like to look at magazines and flip through them and rip out the pages afterward. And
do they have bedtime routines?
I think they calm down and talk and watch some movies, and sometimes different movies, because
say their prayers,
make their nests.
Do you plan to write another book? What would be the subject? Have you got one?
I hope I always will write books. And I kind of have a subjective, my writing process is so organic that I'm a little worried to say anything about it right now, because anything I said would be completely changed by the time the book actually got written.
It's percolating.
Yes.
I hear you. Did you use, let me see, events/experiences that you actually experienced in your book? How often?
Quite often. I can't give you an actual count, but I do know that most of the ape things were either documented experiences written in scientific texts, or else my own experiences. For example, bringing the backpacks and so on. And
I missed, I didn't miss what you had to say, but I was getting the sound back there coming sideways somehow, wasn't working really well. How long did you spend at the Ape Trust? I've been with your research.
It's 6 or 7 visits, but I think that's over. But that doesn't count return flights, because I don't live in Des Moines. So there's, for example, my last visit was, I think, 4 days long, and I spent 4 days there, and I consider that 4 visits, and one of them was.
She's been in and out so long. Did anybody see her? We had no idea. Do you have a plan for your next book? I think you've addressed that. And would you consider another book about the apes and bonobos? Or bonobos?
I'm not keen on sequels. I feel like when I'm done with something, I'm done with it. But you never know.
Unless you write that one about the girls banding together.
The corrections.
Right. How did you manage to keep writing when your children were babies and toddlers? That's a great question.
A really, really wonderful, supportive husband.
Oh.
And this great thing called school.
And her husband's here too. We had the son stand up, so I think it's only
he's
equal
actually
time.
Yeah, there. Definitely my partner in crime.
Do you begin writing at the beginning of your story? Can you describe your process? You've described some of it, but in terms of a sequence, I guess?
I do. I don't use or like outlines, because it's really fun when the characters take over and do unexpected things. I tend to have an idea of what the crisis of a book is going to be, and then I fumble my way toward it. Usually at the end of the book, I then have to throw out the first third of it, because I didn't really know my characters yet. So I might not have the most effective method of writing.
You start with the crisis. That sounds good. And then all you can do is the before and after. Do the bonobos ever show violence towards humans?
Well, I assume if you tried to beat up a bonobo, it would defend itself, but I don't know of any.
But not aggressively seeking out.
No, but there's you can't say that about people or dogs, or there's always some individual in any species is going to have a wiring difficulty.
Mm-hmm. I like that phrase, wiring difficulty. Please describe the research process for your books. Where do your ideas come from?
Usually they come out of left field when I'm starting the book that I've abandoned 3 times already to write other books. And it's, the Water for Elephants, it was a picture in the paper. And there was this one email with the link to the Trust's website that set off. And I just know when it comes, it's because I think I have the best job in the world. I can follow my passions, and if I feel really interested and passionate about something, I actually get to go and follow it for a while and be involved and do things like meet these wonderful apes.
And then we benefit from the passion when we read the novel. It's a nice cycle. You're a very inspiring person. I, too, am intrigued and want to meet the bonobos. What suggestions do you have? I also am a writer and have been in a writing group for 4 years. What do you suggest for publication? What would you recommend to any writer? I'm sure we have several in the room who starting out.
I know that it can be very difficult to find time, especially if you're juggling family, and a job. And so I guess the very best advice I can give is to cut out your writing time, whether that's every day or 3 hours a week, however often you can make it, and make that time sacred. Don't let anything impede upon it, because you can edit anything but a blank page.
Good wisdom. What research did you do for Water for Elephants? How does it how does it compare, I think, for the research you did for the Ape House?
Water for Elephants, I was largely reading historical texts and conversing with historians and looking at archives,
And
whereas...
talking to bonobos.
Now I'm talking to bonobos.
Your love of animals and wildlife are consistent in those two.
Yes,
these
actually,
two books.
I think that many of the social issues are consistent as well, although they're at a different snapshot of time.
And yes, different point of entry or whatever
Yeah.
in terms of the lens you look through. But when did you develop such an interest in animal welfare, wildlife?
I think I've always
Just
been like this. People started asking me
yeah.
just, since Water for Elephants came out, when have you always been like this? And I'm like, what? Isn't everybody? And,
well, you have a horse and a dog, so it's probably
I have
just
2
part of
dogs.
it. 2 dogs.
4 cats, 2 horses,
Are the dogs
and a goat.
here?
No, they're not. If they were small enough, they would be. But
Are they jealous you're visiting bonobos?
they really make funny faces when I come home from an ape trust visit because they smell. They can't figure it out. What is that?
Dirty dog. Do you know if your experience in connecting with the apes is unique, or is there a typical response, or is this their typical response to a new person? I think you mentioned you felt like you really connected.
I feel like that. I hope that's true, but only the people who are with them every day can really say.
The statues of the trust transferred to another. Are they still? I'm not sure I understand this. I'm sorry, sir.
I heard that it was flooded out there, and I was wondering if it recovered. Is it still going to remain in Iowa, or is it being transferred out of state?
I really don't. The question was whether they were going to recover from the flooding or whether they were going to move out of state. And I know that the flooding was really terrible a few years ago, and that the administrative offices were pretty much completely submerged. I think they were actually using boats to get the food to the bonobos. And there was still, in fact, a dam a dam, indoor. I had to climb over a flood wall last visit, but it's gone now.
And the bonobos cage, I think, was really high.
Oh, it
so
is. They just went up.
They just went up, but the staff had to go.
They went up too.
Basement, up and around.
Yeah. And I don't know about the other.
My sense is, I talked to one of the directors tonight, and I think for the moment they're very much here to stay. What book are you working on now? You haven't quite totally, not confident with that it's landed yet.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm circling the idea.
Yeah. And again, advice to young writers. I think we covered that. Do you still play the violin?
Yes and no.
You didn't bring it with you, I can tell.
I'm not going to break into music right now, no.
And I think, are your sons inclined to write or be musicians?
Yes. I'm not sure that all 3 of them are inclined to do both of them, but yes.
Can you describe a lexigram?
It's a pictorial representation of a word, and it's usually not, it doesn't look like the object it is defining. So you can have a thing with a squiggle through it, and that means surprise. And there's some of them are different colors, and I think that was part of the study, was whether or not it needed to be a literal visual cue, and they decided that that simply wasn't important. And I know that at one point the lexicograms would change order on the board, and the bonobos would still be able to follow that. So clearly the lexigram means that word to them.
Is it a little like hieroglyphics?
Yeah.
Are you scared for yourself when you are with the apes that they might attack you?
No. You could not pay me to be in a room with an unrestrained chimpanzee, but no, I have no fear of the bonobos.
Bonobos are really known to be peacemakers versus chimpanzees, who are more aggressive, I think. Well, that was the last question, and you're right, this was fun. I hope you enjoyed it. I sure did. And I
Thank you very much for joining me.
Folks, Sarah's going to be in the gallery signing her books for you, and Barnes & Noble will be out in the foyer selling books. So thank you all for coming.